yesterday's class we have discussed how to create a document type using a root element and how we can specify the child elements for the root and how can we specify what is the data that is supposed to be there in the specific element and all. Okay, now in this class we will see how to define an attribute for a specific element, specific XML element using DTD. Okay, like a element, even we can define attributes also. Just not to define attributes, we have a component named att list. Okay, now let me not go for anything, let me go for directly a from. Now ID and name, now these are not elements, these are attributes. Okay, now mail contains from to subject and body, and from contains some past character data, to contains some past character data, subject and body, all this contains some past character data. Okay, now in from we don't have anything. Okay, now let's consider that we should have some attributes for from element. Now if you want to define attributes for an element, just you go for a att list, the element name, okay, the name of the attribute, okay, data type of the attribute. There are several data types for attributes in DTD. One of them is C data. It's a character data. And we should give whether it is required or not. There are several data types listed in the DTD, but the mostly used data type is C data. It's a character data. Now we have specified that there should be an attribute named ID of type C data in the element from which is required. Just please note that there should be spaces between all these things, between from att list and between from and ID, between ID and C data, between C data and the required. And this should be in uppercase only, C data and required. Okay, now we are specifying that there should be an attribute named ID in the tag from of data type C data, which is mandatory. Slash required means mandatory. Now, so it's telling that attribute ID is required and must be specified for element type from. So from cannot exist without giving a value to attribute ID. So Like this, we can define a ID or a attribute using the DTD. And slash required means it is mandatory. But if you don't give required, is it compiling the DTD or is it giving any compilation error in the DTD? Is it compiling the DTD? It's telling like white space is required before the attribute or something else. It's not compiling the DTD. So definitely we should give either slash required. If that attribute is not mandatory, then we should specify that using implied. Okay? Implied means that attribute is not a mandatory attribute. We may or may not give that attribute in the XML element. Implied means it is not mandatory. So, in this case, even if we don't give any value or even if we don't specify ID, it will compile. Even if you don't specify any ID, it will compile. Okay? And implied attributes can have default values. We can specify default values for implied attributes. There's something here. You see that? Okay? And then we can give something like fixed. Okay? Fixed means it should have a fixed value. Okay? We are telling that this element should have a fixed value, that is ABC, or this attribute should have a fixed value, that is ABC. Now, does fixed mean that it should be mandatory? Does fixed mean that it should be mandatory or it should exist? No, fixed doesn't mean that the attribute should exist. Even the attribute doesn't exist, it will not give anything. But if the attribute exists, it should not exist with other values. If the attribute exists, the value of the attribute should be ABC. That is what fixed is. If the attribute exists, then it should have a fixed value. But it will not throw any error if the attribute doesn't exist. That is what fixed. Okay? Implied means the attribute may or may not exist. And we can specify, rather than giving a data type, we can specify a list of values that attribute can have. Like okay, here we are specifying that ID should have one of the values ABC, DEF or XYZ. The default value is ABC. Okay, now the attribute is not mandatory, but if we specify that the attribute in the from tag or in the from element, then it should have one of these three values. Okay, either ABC or DEF or XYZ, and but the default value is ABC. Okay, by doing this we are specifying that ID should have one among these three values, either ABC or DEF or XYZ. Now let me give some other value which is not among those three. Then it is giving an error that it should contain one of these three values, either ABC or DEF or XYZ. Okay, so this kind of basic validations can be done for attribute, in case of attributes, for what we call using document type or DTD for an XML document. Okay, for an XML document we can define some attributes, or we can define some values for attributes, or we can define some validations for attributes, some basic validations for attributes. Okay, using the DTD. And this is what and this is how we can define attributes. And if we want to define more attributes, just we can define okay. This is how we can define multiple attributes. Okay, different entity list tags. Multiple attributes for the same element. Okay, now this will complete the attributes, how we can define the attributes. Okay, the next thing is how we can let's consider that there is something and I don't want to use this entity references. Okay, I want to use something like this. Will it be accepted? Are these characters accepted less than double quotes? Are these characters accepted in XML? No. But we need to give the corresponding entity references. But it's not like everybody should know all the entity references. Okay? In order to avoid these kind of cases, Okay, if you want to give them as it is, okay, what we do is we'll give them in a specific syntax where we specify the C data. This is a C data syntax. See, if you give this content in say data, okay, then this will be accepted, but the whole content will not be passed. If this is there in say data, only this content will be passed. Okay, in general, in most of the cases, rather than giving entity references while defining XMLs, we use this C data syntax to give some specific special characters. Okay, rather than defining their entity references, which is not understandable, we define them. We define those specific content in the C data, so that it will not be passed. It will be directly sent as it is. In general, if it is PC data, pass character data, then it will be parsed and then sent to the another system. But in this case, if it is having C data, then it will not be passed. Directly, whatever the content is, it will be as it is sent to the other systems. Understood? That's the importance of this C data structure. The content in this C data structure will not be parsed. It will be directly sent, okay, to any other systems that we are sending. Okay, and the next thing is how we can define some customized entity references. There are some standard entity references like ampersand AMP semicolon for ampersand, and in the same way for less than we have ampersand LT semicolon. Like that, how we can define a customized entity reference. Okay, in order to define a customized entity reference, okay, we should go for entity, the name of the entity, let's consider like this copyright, the value. Have you seen this kind of copyright kind of things in any websites? Okay. How they will do means they define a generic thing. See, the copyright will not be specific to specific document. The copyright will be generic for all the documents at all the places. So, there will be, in general, copyrights will be defined as entity references, and they will be reused throughout the documents, throughout all the documents. Okay, just how we can use them means the same way. Ampersand, copyright, simple. Like any other entity references, we can use even the customized entity reference. Here, customized entity reference also will be used same like other entity references. Okay. Now these are some basics of DTD. DTD is a very vast thing. Okay, we need not to learn everything, but once the intention of this discussion is, once you have a DTD in any of your XML files, in 99% scenarios, you will not be given a task. Let's consider like tomorrow you got a job and you will not be given a task to develop a DTD for at least next 6 to 8 years. High level people will do all these things, but the thing is you should know once if you have a DTD in your XML file, okay, and your XML is getting validated, you should know how it is getting validated. Let's consider like if you write anything in XML, if you write, let's consider like this a from tag, okay, from tag it will tell that if you don't give name, it will tell that name is mandatory. But you don't know, you did not write any validation here, but you don't know from where it is getting validated. For that kind of thing, okay, I am telling all these basics, okay. Let's stop at this point just because we have learned more than enough things. If we go on discussing these things, it will be more confusing. This is the basic thing and this is more than required. Even if you go for 6 to 8 years experience in the industry, those guys also don't know these things. So let's stop the discussion here. The intention is at least you will know how the XML document is validated when you have a DTD imported in your document. Okay? And one more thing that we need to discuss is, like rather than writing all the things in the same document, okay, we can separate the XML file and the document type definition, the DTD. Okay, in general the DTD will be written in a separate document whose extension is .dtd. Okay, whatever the thing that we can do, we'll write it in the DTD. Okay, and we'll specify. If it is in the DTD file, we'll specify whether it is system or it can be, the value can be system or even public. System or public. Okay, if the value is system, then it should be used for local purposes. It cannot be exported or it cannot be exposed via internet. So DTDs can be even exposed via internet. Okay, If the value after the root node is system, then it's supposed to be used for private purposes. It cannot be public. That means it should be used only in that system or in that application. But if it is public, means it is supposed to be exposed via internet to other applications also. And either system or public, we should give some URL. Let's consider like okay. But if it is public, if it is system, then URL is enough. But if it is public, just note it down, then I'll explain how it will be in case of public. In case of public, what we do is in case of public, what we do is we should give some name with which this public document should be referred. In case of system, just the URL definition is enough, but in case of public, we should give some name with which this public document can be referred.
It's like source address. So
This is the source address. Okay, this is the like URL in which the public document type definition should exist. Okay, but this is the name, reference name. See, in this URL there might be any number of details, but with what name we should specify this means using the public name. Okay, now if we want to use that in our XML file, just what we'll do is, let's consider like, let me go back to the system. No. Just we'll give the TTD file name. Or we can give the URL like slash hello.dtt also, but doesn't make any difference if it is in the same application. If it is public, then we should give the same syntax. Public name also should be given here. If it is public, then we should give even the public name. So that we are accessing a DTD from a public resource. Okay. Validation of XML documents using DTDs is a very older approach. Okay, but still it is used for some of the XML definitions. It's not completely ruined up, but it's a very older approach. Okay, and it's not that much flexible. Let's consider like if you want to define a specific attribute to be integer, we cannot do that using DTD. There are some concise or very limited data types in DTD, defining attributes or elements. Okay, and if you want to define the recurrence of elements, let's consider like the element should occur once or twice or thrice. If you want to define that, we can define that using DTD also, but it's very complex structure. It's not very simple. Let's consider like if you want to define an element to occur twice, then we should go for this element and we should define like this again. Okay, so which supposed to be something like a little bit complex structures. Okay, if you want to define some values x or y or z, okay, even that is a complex structure. So the DTD is having some complex mechanism to define elements, to define attributes, to define their values, to perform validations, as well as the DTD doesn't have any data types concepts, or DTD doesn't provide you much more features to perform validations, and DTD cannot provide, or DTD will not provide you to define customized elements. Okay, customized format of elements or customized data types. But there are some ways to define this in a better way. These are the disadvantages of DTDs. Okay, like we have only limited data types, and that limited data types are very primitive. Okay, we need to write some complex code or complex DTD structures for achieving simple things. Okay, and DTD is a very older approach. Okay, several newer approaches have come to define the structure of XML or to validate the XML in a better way, in an efficient way, and even in a simpler way. And one of the best approach for achieving this is using a XML schema. Okay, earlier days we used to use DTD for this purpose, but for the same purpose, to do it more conveniently, to do it more flexibly, to do it more efficiently, okay, we use XML schemas. Most of the current day validations of XML are being done using XML schemas. XML schema. and the DTD document type definition will be written in a file with extension .dtd. Okay, the XML schema will be written. In general, we won't write the validation logic in the same XML file. We'll write in separate file and we'll import that file. It will be done either in DTD or XSD. Okay, now this DTD, okay, the document type definition, since it is a primitive one, it will not support many things. Okay, and since it is complex, we'll go for a schema based approach. Okay, we'll go for a schema based approach to validate or to structure XML documents, to perform some operations using the XML documents. Then how we can define a schema of XML and how we can validate the XML using a schema, or how we can import the schema in our XML file, that we'll discuss. Okay, the first thing is how we can. Okay, before discussing all these things, before discussing about schema, there is one thing that I need to discuss, that is namespaces. XML namespace. XML namespaces. What are namespaces in XML? How we use them? That we'll discuss. These XML namespaces, okay, are used to import the XML elements that are in external resources. XML namespaces are used to import the XML elements, import the XML elements that exist in some external resources. XML elements that exist in some external resources by avoiding the naming conflicts. By avoiding the naming conflicts. Naming conflicts. See, namespaces are used to import the XML elements present in some external documents or external resources. Resources here means there will be some external XML files or XML definitions. Okay, from those XML files or XML definitions, we import those XML definitions or XML files into our base XML file. Then how we can do that? How we can make use of XML definitions that are defined in some external resources in our application means just we use namespaces. Okay, just in order to use namespaces we need not do much, just okay, then we should use XML namespace test. See, this is the external resource that I am using. This is the external resource that I am using. So then how we should use means test colon from This is how we can go with some external resources. So we are using a namespace here. Just we are using a namespace here using XML namespace :test. So whatever this XML definitions that come from this site or this URL, okay, whatever the XML definitions that come from this URL should be used with the prefix test. This is the prefix of the namespace. This XML namespace NS, okay, this string XML NS will be used to import the definitions from some external resources. Then this is the URL of the external resource, and this is the prefix. This is the prefix of the namespace that we need to use in this document. Understood? So if we are using any XML element in this document, okay, that are related to this URL, we should use the prefix test.
Only for external elements.
Yes, we use namespaces only for external elements. When there are some external elements in some URL, okay, or external element definitions in some URL, then to import them to our application or to import them to our XML file, we use XMLNS. Then if you give XMLNS : some prefix, then the XML definitions in that URL should be used in our document using that prefix. Let's consider like there are 10 XML elements defined in that URL. Then those 10 XML definitions should be used in our XML file using that prefix only. Without using that prefix, we cannot use our XML components. Understood?
Using that prefix.
See, using that prefix means test : 2, test : subject, test : body. We cannot use, let's consider like body is there in this www.google.com. Body is not our local definition, the definition is there in google.com. So, body cannot be used directly like this. Even though we have imported the namespace. Even though we have imported that URL through the namespace, we cannot use directly like this, just because for the namespace I have given a prefix. Okay? Even we can avoid this prefix, but to avoid the naming conflicts, we should keep the prefix. It's a standard to keep the prefix to avoid naming conflicts. Let's consider like body is there in our definition as well as body is there in google.com definition also. Then which will be preferred means we cannot tell. So to avoid the kind of conflicts or naming conflicts between the XML components or XML elements, while importing the external XML definitions, we should use the prefix. That's a standard to avoid the naming conflict. Let's consider like we are importing the XML definitions from multiple URLs. Let's consider like we are importing the namespaces from google.com as well as yahoo.com. Google.com have a definition for body, yahoo.com also have a definition for body. But if we want both, we are importing the both. But how we can distinguish between the body XML element of Google and body XML element of Yahoo means through the prefix. Okay? Prefixes are not mandatory, but prefixes are the standard way to do just because to avoid the naming conflicts. Yeah, we use a prefix. We can specify any prefix. If I specify Rajesh, then we should use Rajesh : something.
But name is equal to Rajesh is a prefix.
Pardon?
That name is equal to Rajesh is.
See, this is an attribute that I have defined myself. This is not the thing that I need to consider. This is what? XMLNS : something equal to the URL. This is the what we call, this is what we call the namespace. Yes.
What is the difference in that?
Yeah, test is the prefix. See, XML NS is the syntax where we can import the what we call definitions, XML definitions from the URL. Okay, even we can give without this prefix also, XML NS colon test also. But we give test just because we should uniquely identify that. In place of test, even we can give Rajesh also. But if we give Rajesh here, then all the test columns should be replaced by
concerning about the distributing URL, whether it's
what?
standard or Google.
Pardon?
When we are taking data for the standard for Google example.
Okay.
What is the reason for the both URL?
See, I'm telling it as an example.
In what context? What is it?
See, how in general how it happens is, we'll write some XML definitions, and XML definitions will be exposed through some URL. Okay, and if you want to, it's not like Google or Yahoo will expose XML definitions. I'm telling it as an example. Let's consider like I'm developing application. My application is there in this URL. Okay, now in this URL, which in the application which is present in this URL, see, if we enter www.google.com, okay, how it will do? Just it is a name that appears to us, but in the backend there will be some specific port number, there will be some server name, and there will be some IP address where exactly the application is located. That information will be there in the backend, but this is what we call as a domain name. So in that application, in the application that we are running in that server with this for this domain name, in that application we'll define some schema definitions and we'll expose them. Okay, we'll define some XML definitions and we'll expose them. The consumer, what he will do means, just through namespaces he will give the URL and he will consume the XML definitions present in the URL. For example, I have given Google, but it's not Google will expose the XML definitions. Just since it is a URL, I have given example as google.com. It's not a default kind of thing. Okay?
So we should use the namespace group that
If we may, that's what my next concept is. Okay? We may get the namespaces either from root element or even the child elements. If it is from the root element, then that will be applicable for all the child elements. If it is for specific child element, then it will be applicable only for the child. Okay? If you do this here,
Sir, if any organization having two URLs,
any organization having?
two URLs,
Okay.
then how will you write? You want to
See, two URLs are there means two applications will be there, right? Same application, two URLs.
any organization having two URLs.
See,
I want to write
if there are two URLs, okay, the thing is, the backend application might be the same. See, if we have www.google.com, www.rajesh.com pointing to the same application, okay, the application is the same. So, if you give this URL or that URL, the backend application is the same, so the definitions also will be the same. Whether we give X or Y, it will be the same, right? See, it's not the name, it's not the domain name that we need to consider. It's the backend application that is what we need to consider. But in general, as you told, it will not be in most of the cases. Okay? One backend URL will have only one domain name. Understood everybody what is the domain name, what is the backend URL? See, when we type Google, www.google.com, okay, this is what we display, we type in the browser address bar. Okay, Google is a domain name for some URL. The backend URL might be /. Okay, the IP address of the system. Okay, colon. Okay, then some port number / the application name. Like this is the backend URL for this domain name. But let's consider like for the same backend URL, if you give different domain names. It is what that appears in the browser address bar. But the actual URL that is triggered is this only. Whether we type google.com or rajesh.com, it will be redirected to the same backend URL. So in this URL we expose the XML definitions. So whether you use the first or second URL, will that make any difference? No, it doesn't make any difference. Why we use domain names means, see, let's consider like email. I don't know much about the internet technologies. So typing this kind of URL and remembering this kind of syntax is very difficult for me. Even for a software developer also, remembering the IP address or remembering the port number or remembering the exact syntax of the URL is very difficult. So they came up with the concept of domain name. So the user will enter the domain name, as per the domain name, the application itself will redirect to the specific URL. Okay? Where we are? Yeah. We told that we have namespaces, and using namespaces and the corresponding prefix, we can define, we can import, or we can get the schema definitions, or we can get the XML definitions from some external URLs or external resources. Okay, and once we have knowledge of these namespaces, then let me go back to this schema. Okay, in schema these namespaces are used. Okay, we'll go back to the schema. Okay, to achieve or to get up with disadvantages of DTDs. Like I have listed many disadvantages of DTDs to get up or to overcome those disadvantages of DTDs. Another, okay, XML definition. Okay, DTD also some type of definition, defining. DTD is one of the way of defining the XML structure. Okay, XML elements or attributes or and all. Okay, even schema is also another way of definition of the XML structure. Okay, this schema is one approach and it is another approach, but this is a older approach and schema is a newer approach, so it has some more advanced things when compared to DTDs. So current day XML files are validated or are defined with schema only. Okay, current day XML files mostly they are defined using schema only. How we can use schema? Okay, to define the structure of XML document means, see, for a document type we have a specific file named DTDs, document type definition. In the same way, okay, in order to define schema, we will not define the schema in the same XML file. We will define a schema in a separate XML file. Okay, the extension is XSD, XML schema definition. XML, the extension of the schema files is .xsd, XML schema definition. The extension for the document type is .ddd, document type definition. In the same way, the extension of the file where we keep the schema is .xsd, XML schema definition. Some of you guys told that you have classes, right? Only they have classes? The rest of them don't have any classes, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. 10 onwards. Okay then, 10 is fine. Okay. Now let me develop a sample schema in a XSD file rather than developing the same XML file. Already we know why we develop them in a separate file. Okay. Rather than combining everything in the same file, we develop the definitions in separate files. For document types, we'll develop a DTD file. For XML schema, we'll develop a XSD. Okay, we'll develop a XSD file. This I have developed a file named hello.xsd. Okay, just right click, go for new, go for others. Okay, just type XML. We'll find XML schema. Okay, so just it will give the XSD file. Just you need to have a ample knowledge how to use Eclipse. Okay, hello.xsd. So Eclipse will provide you a UI where we can define elements, components, attributes and all, but we'll do that manually first. Okay, just if you right click here, if you add element, okay, it will go for the element, it will give you the element, but we don't go for such kind of UI things. Just we'll develop it manually so that we can understand it better. Okay. So this is the base tag and this is the root tag, but in general we give some namespaces with a prefix. Most of the XML schemas will be fetched from most of the schema definitions will be fetched from w3schools.org. Okay, from this location, most of the schema definitions, most of the schema default definitions, default data types or default structures will be fetched from this URL. Okay, what are these typed namespaces and what are these TNS and what is this element from default, that we'll see later. But for a simple XSD file, these are not required. If you want to expose this XSD file as public to others, then these are required, but we'll stop them right now for a sample XML schema definitions. Now, basically, this XML schema, okay, XML elements, okay, are of two types. They can be of simple type, they can be of complex type. XML elements in schema, with respect to schema, With respect to schema, XML elements can be of two types. One is a simple type, another is a complex type. Okay, one is a simple type, another is a complex type. Simple type means the element will have simple values like a text, a boolean, a decimal, a date value, or some value, time value or number value. These are simple values. Okay, if the XML element contains simple values, then the XML element is said to be a simple type. Okay, if the XML element has simple values like a normal string or a normal boolean or a number or a date or a time. Okay, if XML element contains a content which has this kind of simple values, okay, then we define it as a simple type. We tell it as a simple type. But what is a complex type means? If the XML element still have some other XML elements like mail has from has ID and name. If this is the structure, if this is a hierarchical structure, if this hierarchical structure is used, then it is said to be a complex structure. Or those kind of XML elements are said to be complex elements. If the XML element has some simple data like a string or something else, then it is said to be a simple type. But if the same XML element is said to have some complex structure, like it should have some child element or it should have multiple child elements, in that case, it's said to be a complex structure. So, before defining any element, we should specify whether it is a simple type or it is a complex type. in a sequence we should have element. The best thing is this is the root element. What is the best that we can use? I did not remember this data type exactly, but this is some. I'll explain you about this base later on, but in the XSD colon element, we'll give like what is the name of the element, okay? And what is the type of the element? Type can be a string. There are several data types which are listed. Okay, simple type, any array, boolean, byte, date, double, duration, float. These are the available data types. Are these kind of data types available in case of DDD? DDD has only couple of data types like C data or PC data or something else. But these kind of specific data types are not available in case of DDD. So we can define some elements. XHD colon, what we call int or integer, both are same. And if you want, we can init here itself. Then there is another element name which is of string. By doing this, I am specifying that this element mail is a complex type which has some complex content. I'm not sure about this extension what it is. But in this mail there should be a sequence of elements. There should be a sequence of elements. ID, name. ID and name. And we can specify how many times the ID occurs very easily by using max occurs and min occurs. Max occur means at maximum how many times it can occur. Min occurs means minimum how many times it should occur. Then if my requirement is it should be either 0 or 1. It should be either 0 or 1. Then what is the value of min occurs and what is the value of max occurs? This tag can occur, this element can occur either 0 times or once. Then what should be the value of min and what is the value of max? Min is 0 and max is 1. Just because the minimum times it can occur is 0 and the maximum times it can occur is 1. If it is either 1 or 2, then minimum is 1 and maximum is 2. Then like this we can specify very easily. And just we can specify like what is the default value, whether it is fixed or not. And nullable is false means whether it can be blank or not, or this kind of attributes. Just it can be specified. By any attribute, like if it is fixed, then the value should be fixed. Like that. So even in this element also we can write a complex structure. Like let's consider like if name has something else, then in this element again we can write a nested thing, like the same kind of thing. Let's consider like name has two. One is let's consider like it is from. From has two things. One is ID. One is name and one is phone number. Now we write a complex type. We write a complex type here. Now here we write a complex type which has from has name and mobile. Name is of type string Mobile is of type integer. Like this, we can define some nested elements. Okay, we can define it directly a simple type or a element with a complex type also. Okay, in a nested way. Now, mail contains ID and from. Okay, and from contains name and mobile number. Okay, but ID is a simple type which is of type integer, but from is a complex type which can contain two child elements. One child element is name, another child element is mobile. Name should contain a string and mobile should contain an integer. Like that it will be. But I'm not sure about this base, but this structure is like this only. Okay, the structure is like this only. How we can define XML schema means like this. What are the elements? What is the root element? What are the child elements? Is it a simple type or a complex type? If it is a simple type, then we'll write it directly as element. If it is a complex type, then we'll write like this in a complex content. Okay, but there will be some changes in this schema document based on the requirement, like we can alter the properties and all, but the basic funda or the basic thing for this XML document is this. What are the elements? Okay, how many times an element can occur in the parent? What is the root element? Okay, whether this is a simple type or complex type, how many times it can occur? What is the data type? Is it a fixed or is it mandatory to have? Okay, all those things. We can define even attributes also. Okay, all those things we can specify using a tree kind of structure, a hierarchical structure, which we can understand in a better manner, and we can leverage the things. We can have more options to control the XML document. Okay, if we use this kind of schemas. Okay, nowadays 99% XML validation or XML structuring will be done using XSD only. Okay, now let's consider like we told in earlier example, IRCTC will be interacting with SBI and IRCTC will be sending some information to SBI in form of a XML document. What should be how IRCTC will come to know what should be the format that SBI will accept? Means IRCTC will import the XSD of SBI. IRCTC will import the XSD of SBI, and as per the XSD it will prepare the XML document. Okay, SBI will tell that this is my URL in which my XSD will exist. So IRCTC will import that XSD present in that URL and it will form the XML document as per that XSD. Understood? This is how the definitions will be shared across the applications. Okay, it's not like they will give you a file, okay, which lists all the documents. Okay, the SBI will expose, okay, its XSD through its URL, and IRCTC will consume that XSD, and as per the XSD, it will prepare the XML document.
So XML document is not shared.
XML document is shared, but what should be the format of XML document means it will be prepared as per the imported XSD. Okay, so let's consider like IRCTC is the consumer, ICICI or SBI is the producer. Now ICICI or SBI is producing the service and IRCTC is consuming the service. Then who will expose the XSD? SBI will expose the XSD and IRCTC will consume the XSD, and as per that XSD, IRCTC will prepare XML file and will transfer to SBI. It will be in that manner. Okay? And just we can make some R&D how it can be. See, it's a basic thing. Like in 99% of the cases, at least up to 10 more years, you won't get a chance to develop XSDs. It will be done only by architects. But if you have XSD imported, you should know how the XSD works. internally. Okay, so just XSD will have some definitions. What is the root element, what are the child elements, and what are the attributes defined in this manner. Okay, if you want to tweak something, you can tweak on the XSDs. And just after going home, Google like how we can import the XSDs in our application. Okay, it's like a homework for you. Okay, I have developed the XSD in my local. How we can import this XSD in your XML file? Just learn that, and tomorrow after coming, even I'll explain that. Okay. And do you have any doubts regarding this? See, try to have a basic example, a simple mail tag with from and to, using a schema. Then you can, then the next thing is, try to import that XSD in your local XML file, and try to validate the XML file against to the Excel sheet, and then you can come to know it better. But these things are not required for your standards as a fresher. Okay, we will not be developing. Okay. XSD is at least up to 8 to 10 years more, but you should know what happens in the backend. Okay, tomorrow I'll give some more basics about XSD. Okay, otherwise depends. I'll start with Hibernate. Okay, basically Hibernate is a framework which is a predefined framework. Just we use that framework to interact with the database from a Java application. Do you have the basics of JDBC? Do all of you have the basics of JDBC? Everybody? Yes or no? If it is no, then I think Sharad, you have posted the videos, right? Observe the videos, okay, in Facebook, and at least get some basics of JDBC. What is JDBC? How it will work and all. Okay, basically JDBC is a Java database connectivity which is used to connect to a database from a Java application. It will have so many classes, so many syntaxes where we can connect, how we can different ways to connect to a database, different ways to perform some transactions with a database. There are different things in JDBC. Try to get the basics of JDBC before coming to the next class. So for that reason, tomorrow we don't have any class. So, with the idea that you will have, those who don't have idea basics of JDBC will learn the basics of JDBC. Mail ID? No, in Facebook we will be sharing the videos, right? Do you know that? Sharath will be sharing whatever the class is there, we will be recording the screen captures, and Sharath will be sharing those screen capture videos in Facebook account, in our Facebook account. Most of our class members are there in the Facebook account, so you can get it from there. Okay, you can ask any of your friends how to access them. Okay, just today and tomorrow, those who don't know JDBC, learn the JDBC through that videos. Those who already learned JDBC, those who already know JDBC, brush up your knowledge with JDBC, so that we can understand Hibernate better. Okay, so our next class will be on Monday, where we will be discussing some of other basics of this XSD, or we'll directly skip to Hibernate. Okay.